I've got one flame to burn, one race that I can say I ran.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 21047.com podcast. My name is Keith Cartwright. I am the host of this show, and I am really glad to have you along listening in today, wherever it is that you're listening, and whenever it is that you might be checking this out and listening in. This episode today is sponsored by my good friend Ashley Gladder. Ashley has been a longtime supporter of everything that I'm trying to do here at 21047.com. And so I had a chance to actually hang out with Ashley last weekend here in Richmond. The annual Meg's Miles supporters Facebook page / family reunion. Everybody kind of gets together here around the Richmond Marathon. So a bunch of first-time runners, first-time marathoners, lots of big stuff happening last weekend. And I got to hang out with Ashley a little bit. So I appreciate the financial support that she gives me for this mission each and every month. It is helpful to bring powerful stories, especially like the powerful story I'm going to bring to you all today. If you want to learn more about supporting this show and everything I try to do, you can go to my website, 21047.com, TWOTIM47.com. Click on the Support Me tab, and then you can read some various ways that you can help me out, including through the Patreon platform. Patreon's just a platform where creatives like myself can get financial backing on a monthly sort of membership basis from different folks out there listening or enjoying the work that we do. So anyhow, I have a Patreon page. You can go to my website, click on Support Me, and it'll take you to that Patreon page, and you can check it out. So today's episode is an interview sort of that came out of the blue, but I talk an awful lot on this show about these whispers that I get that often turn into something much bigger than the initial whisper. This episode and this conversation may be the greatest example of that in this whole podcasting journey. I received an email through I work part-time at Randolph-Macon College, and we get work-related emails like all of us get on our jobs, and like maybe many of you, I frequently just delete a lot of them unless they're from known sources that have a known work relationship with me. So I just try to filter out a lot of the email noise, as I know I'm talking to folks who get what I'm saying. So I'm not liking to ignore people, but we fall into a rhythm with our email that hopefully maximizes the best use of our time. And so one of those emails that I usually ignore comes from the campus bookstore. And again, lots of good stuff comes out of the campus bookstore, just usually doesn't tie in directly to the work that I do. However, on this particular email, it talked about one of the Randolph-Macon alumni coming back to town, going to have a book signing, going to talk about the work he does with this organization, Souls for Souls. His name was Buddy Teaster. So my curiosity, I'm not sure what got me curious. I think books, I like to write, so I'm always willing to and anxious to read up on an author. Souls for Souls, this whole shoe thing, had a connection with me. I've been a part in the running community of some shoe drives. Buddy Teaster, that's the coolest name ever. I think I want to change my name to Buddy Teaster. So that caught my attention. And then I started digging into this guy and found out that he's a crazy, crazy runner, runs really long distances. And here lately, my running journey has at least taken me to a place where I'm interested about running further, a little bit farther every time. Not that I've accomplished that yet, but I'm intrigued by it. Anyhow, I started digging into this Buddy Teaster and really got interested in the work he's doing with Souls for Souls. I picked up his book, Shoestrings, and read it and reached out to Buddy and said, if you're going to be in town here in Ashland and I could have the chance to sit down and talk about all of this, it would sort of be a momentary dream come true, a dream that was hatched, right? And just sort of processing all of this stuff I'd been digging into. But I reached out to Buddy, asked if he'd be willing to do that, and a busy, busy man was very, very generous with his time. And so when he came to Randolph-Macon, I had the chance to sit down and have this conversation with him that you are about to listen to. It was a powerful conversation. I dare say it will be the trigger for changing a lot that I do in my life. It certainly has changed the way that I look at giving. It's changed the way that I look at poverty. It's given me a lot more hope that in a personal way, we have a much greater opportunity to make an impact on an overwhelming area of suffering that I think sometimes we can see ourselves as maybe not having the opportunity to make a dent, and so therefore we don't do anything at all. This conversation with Buddy Teaster is just fascinating to me. So Buddy took on the role of leading Souls for Souls at a time when it was a growing organization, but a lot of media around it wasn't favorable, so it was kind of getting a bad name. And so Buddy came in and took over. At that time, we don't get much into the background of all that was going on, all the negative noise around Souls for Souls. Just know that he came at a tough time when things were going the wrong way, and has done a lot of things to switch the direction of that, telling the stories of the organization that I think ultimately had the biggest impact on me. So with that background, I'm just going to turn this over to my conversation with Buddy Teaster. We started off by talking a little running, then we get hard into Souls for Souls, and finish up with a little bit of running. So a little bit of everything here. I hope you'll pay attention to this. This guy is incredible. He's got a great story. And like I said, I hope he'll shape your heart for giving, especially towards Souls for Souls, like he has shaped mine in a very big way. So let me talk no more. Let me hand this over to my conversation with Buddy Teaster. All right, well, Buddy Teaster, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited.
Yeah, so last week we were here at Randolph-Macon, and you're a Randolph-Macon grad here. And so last week we get an email, here all the staff, that this guy Buddy Teaster's coming to Randolph-Macon, homecoming weekend. Let's collect some shoes and support his organization, Souls for Souls. And I think probably that's what captured my attention first. I've been a part in the running community of a couple of shoe drives, so I was curious about that. The name Buddy Teaster, I'm going to tell you, you're lucky you're in a good role. That has a natural drawl to it. Then I went to digging into Buddy Teaster, so you're the CEO of this organization, so there's quite a bit of information about you out there. And one of the first things I stumbled upon was you're a runner, and more specifically, an ultra runner. And folks who are listening to this know I spent the last 6 months training for building up my first ultra adventure, the 35-mile Georgia Jewel. And I went down there and tried to tackle that. I guess it's been 2 or 3 weeks ago now. I'm still in the healing process. And it didn't go well. You know, I about halfway through, I had to pull myself off. It was just such a hot, humid day, and I don't do well with heat and humidity. So I'm interested to dig a little bit into your running journey, and then we'll talk about Souls for Souls. You know, one of the things you've reached out by email here the last couple of days, and you made mention, hey, when you were here at Randolph-Macon, you weren't a runner. So I'm curious, when did you start running? How did your running journey start?
It's so great that you asked that question, because I had a really powerful memory experience this morning. So like you, I'm recovering. I just did a race a few weeks ago. And when I was here, I didn't know what the trails were. So I looked on the map and I saw a little thing called Stony Run Trail. I could see it was really short. I thought, well, that'll give me a starting point. So I went over, it was dark, parked, I walked, and it ended up on James Street. So after I graduated, I rented the second floor of a woman's house, Dodie Jerome, 315 James Street. That was the first time I ever ran was in the summer of 1988 from that house that I walked on this morning. So I still remember it. It was August of 1988. I was about to move to Texas to start graduate school. And my brother, who was he was at Randolph-Macon for 2 years. He and I were roommates here. He was a high school runner and a college runner. And he finally said, you just need to do this. And so this morning I realized this is where it started for me. 30 years ago, this year is when I started running for the first time.
So in your email, you said you were recovering from the Grindstone 100, and I take it that wasn't 100 yards. It was 100 miles.
100 miles.
How on earth did you get from James Street to a 100-mile runner?
So, I think early on it's probably not different than most people who get into any kind of ultra running. I started running. I ran a 5K. I ran a 10K. I eventually, my brother moved to Texas in the early 90s, and then he helped me do my first marathon. He'd done a couple in 1994. So I did that for a few years, and then I once trained really hard to try to qualify for Boston. And I wasn't even close. I ran a 3:19 marathon, and I think I needed to run like a 3:10. So, as you know, 9 minutes is a long time.
Right.
So, and I trained as hard as I could. I had nothing left. So I thought, I know I can't train harder. Maybe I can run longer. That was the level of thought that went into it. Then the following year, I ran my first 50K, and it was a disaster. Probably my worst running experience ever. I almost quit running after it. I thought, well, it's just a little longer than a marathon. How much harder can it be? And I did, as it turns out, everything wrong. Yeah. Just like you said, your first experience, I did everything wrong. And by the end, I was cramping and I could hardly walk. And these guys like 80 years old were coming past me. And I thought, I quit. I'm done. So I finished the race, and I'd done this all by myself. This was 2000. There wasn't much on the internet. I didn't really know what I was doing. So I started talking to people. I'm like, well, I tried this 50K thing. And they're like, oh yeah, you should do this. You should do that. I'm like, oh my God, I did everything wrong. So I thought I'll give it one more chance. So the following year, I went back to the same race, had a great experience, and then I was hooked. So then it was 50K. I did a few 50Ks, and I did some 50 milers. And then finally in 2004, I did my first 100-miler. Which is still my fastest, by the way. It's never gotten better than that. And I just am hooked. The community of ultra runners I really love, and the chance to be out. I do all trail running for these races. I love being outside, and it's a huge part of who I am now. So I don't think there's anything dramatic other than, can I go a little further? Can I go a little further? Was the only thing that's probably any different than a marathon runner who started out as a 5K runner.
What is it about this trail community that you're drawn to?
I'm not a fast runner. Like, I'm never competitive in terms of finishing. And I have seen so many instances of people who have sacrificed their race or certainly their time to help somebody out. And that doesn't happen in 10Ks. It doesn't happen in marathon. In the road community, very different. Triathlon community, which I don't know very well, super different. I'm like, I love a place where helping your pal on the trail matters more than, do you finish 2 minutes faster? And I saw that happen over and over and over again. I just finished Grindstone, as you said. The turnaround point was pretty hot, humid, and the aid station ran out of Coke, which at mile 50 on this race was bad. Like, a lot of people feeling lousy. Coke can settle your stomach. There are lots of good reasons, right? One of the aid station volunteers had a personal thing of Gatorade. He shared it with one person, and that person realized there were other people who needed it more, and he gave it all away. That blows me away. So that was 16 hours in. So people have already been out a long time. They have a hell of a long way to go to get back, and yet they are still like, oh, you need this more than I do. That's why I love the community.
Yeah, you'll love this story then. So I just told you I had a rough experience at the Georgia Jewel. It was 96 degrees. The heat index was even worse. And I am just I know on a day like that, this is going to be hard.
Right.
More than any other element, that humidity, that dew point just does me in. So I and I was running with a friend of mine. She was running her first ultra as well. Mm-hmm. And she'd run with me before when I'd struggled with heat. So she was pretty adamant, you doing okay? You doing okay? And almost the whole way I was, because it was pretty cool when we started out. But at mile 16 it just hit me. And I mean, I was nauseous, starting to get dizzy. All of a sudden, real quick, started wondering, how am I getting off this mountain that we were on? And she said, well, what do you need? And I had some Morton sport drink I'd been drinking, but it all of a sudden just tasted awful. And I said, what I need is cold water, but there is no cold water. She said, the next aid station is at mile 18. I'll run and get you cold water and come back.
Wow.
Which she did. But while she was gone, there must have been 7, 8 runners who came by me. And it was almost like somebody gave them a script at the bottom. Every one of them, first words out of their mouth, do you need anything? And you knew they were ready to give you anything that they had in that. And I've said in the, failure stings, nobody likes to not finish. But I wrote a little bit about, sometimes failure hides the value in experience. And just that experience, really, I've come away, shaped me, and that community was
I'm glad you had
beautiful.
That experience on your first one, because it's real. I mean, my experience is no matter the distance, no matter the conditions, that's the ethos of the trail running community, and I think it's really beautiful.
Yeah. What about the trails themselves? It sounds like, you did a lot of the road running. What has captured you about the trail?
Man, so many things. One, it's usually more interesting than the road, right? There's just more going on, whether it's birds or animals or just the terrain. But I also think, there's probably a lot of research out there. It's just calmer. And one of my favorite things is running at night. I really love to run at night. And it's a very different vibe, right? Your world is not much bigger than your headlamp.
Yeah. And
the sounds change. If I can, running under a full moon is one of the best experiences. In 2006, there were 6 friends, including me. We decided to do the rim to rim to rim of the Grand Canyon, and we timed it to do it under a full moon. And I cannot tell you how magical that was. And you could have, we were out there in the day, and it was fabulous. But to be in that canyon under a full moon and not even need a headlamp to run, spectacular.
It's a coincidence, actually. My buddy, who I met through this Georgia Jewel, Gregory Byerline, and he's got a group in Tennessee there. I forget what they are called, the Moonshine Runners, the Moonshiners. Anyway, they get together. He's got this club. They get together every full moon of every month, and they run together.
Well, I live in Nashville. You may have to introduce me to these guys.
I will do that. Yeah, and I know he'll when we talked about it on this podcast, he just talked about it was the greatest running experience in the world. Yeah, kind of like you just described. So I'll connect him with you. So I want to then move into, and it'll be interesting as we go through sort of your role with Souls for Souls, exploring how any of that is influenced by this running, this sort of, and I'll reference here in a little bit, you talk about the grit in some of these pieces. I'm wondering if you ever associate that with your running. But I'm going to talk a lot based on, so you've got a book out, and the book is Shoestrings, how your donated shoes and clothes help people pull themselves out of poverty. And to be honest with you, that was one of the first things that drew me to you in this story, because I was involved in a couple of pretty big shoe drives. A couple of years ago, we did a big one through a running group that I'm in response to the refugees. And there was just a outpouring of outcry for need for shoes. Yeah. Clearly they were traveling long distances and just in need of shoes. And so I got that piece and sort of a relief type effort. But you referenced pulling people out of poverty with shoes. And so I had to read a little more into that story. I got a better understanding of it now. We'll talk about that, how you actually use these shoes as part of the system to help grow people out of poverty. when you took over Souls for Souls, and in the introduction, I will have talked a little bit about some of the complications. It was a good organization and some things going on. You walked into a pretty tough situation for a leader to take over. And I read this early on in the book. When you took over, you said, look, I don't know everything that happened. I don't know you and you don't know me, but I can promise you this, starting right now, we're going to tell each other the truth every day. What about you and what about who you are and what you had done made that something to put out there so early and taking on what was a really tough transition?
You know, looking back, it was absolutely the right thing. You know, at the time, I had maybe a feeling that might be the case. It's only with some perspective that I realized how important it was, not just for me, but for everybody who was a part of the organization. Because, one, I believe that. You know, transparency solves a lot of problems in all parts of, at least in my life. I think it should be true for most folks.
Right.
Maybe if you work for the CIA, it's not recommended, but for most people, it's a good idea. And in particular at Souls for Souls, the people who were there, they felt lied to. I mean, they felt betrayed. That was the word that they used. And that's a powerful word to say someone betrayed you. So I think it was a little bit of both, of recognizing that we really have to say what's going on here. It is really bad. The financial situation is dire. The board is really fallen apart. Our reputation is in tatters. And most importantly, we had to say, we sell shoes. We'll talk more about what that means. But the people who were there said felt like they were working for an organization that had told them in writing and in meetings, we don't sell shoes. And when I came in, I'm like, hey guys, we sell shoes.
Yeah.
And here's why it matters. And if we weren't able to talk about that, as well as, well, wait a minute, I've been here for 8 years and that's not the story. That takes a lot of time to build the trust for someone to say, I understand you, for me to believe that they're asking from the right place. And it has become the bedrock for all of our other values and everything else that we've done. I mean, if you ask, we'll tell you. It's that simple. Whether you're a board member, whether you work for Adidas, or whether you collect 3 pairs of shoes and from your closet and ship them in, you can ask us a question. There's no hesitation about what we tell you.
Yeah. So early on, and this speaks to sort of this assumption I made, okay, we donate shoes and they give these shoes away. Early on, the tagline was changed from changing the world one pair at a time, which you said conveys and perpetuates the notion of only giving shoes away. That changed to wearing out poverty.
Yeah.
So explain to a guy like me, and you said that was actually, you changed that so it would trigger conversations.
Absolutely.
Trigger me sitting here with you saying, explain that to me, because I get this whole idea. When I donate shoes, you just give them to the people who need them. I'm not quite sure how I would get how me donating shoes is going to wear out poverty.
Well, it was a very conscious, we talked about it a lot before we did it, as you might imagine. It wasn't a cavalier kind of decision. But the one thing, even though it's easy for me, again, I never met the founder. I didn't meet a lot of the people who were there. One of the things kind of got off the rails. I only saw what I saw. But it did take me long to understand. It's way easier to say, we give away shoes. Like, you understand that. I don't know. If I say to you, oh, we sell your shoes to poor people, after you're done being mad, you have to give me another 90 seconds to explain that.
Right.
And it's hard. You can't do that on Facebook. You can't do that in an email. So the decision to do it meant we were committing to endless conversation about what we do with shoes. 6 years later, and that's how long I've been there, it has made us so much stronger because we have to own it. There's no like, oh, you just don't feel good. You have to explain what's behind the idea. And so what became clear very quickly is the ability to help in the short term, which we are still very engaged in. Giving away shoes for free is still an important part of our mission. But that's a short-term relief.
Right.
And if we're serious about what we're doing, we have the opportunity to go further. We don't have to. We could give it all away for free.
Right.
But the founders made a good decision, which I think is if we're going to give anything away for free, it should be new. You can make other decisions. I have a middle brother who, after the hurricanes last year in Florida, Texas, and Puerto Rico, he called me up and he ripped me a new one because we weren't giving away used shoes. He said, they need shoes right now. I said, dude, I get it. And there are organizations who are shipping lots of used stuff there.
Right.
That's a fine model. It's not our model.
Right.
But now we have all this used stuff.
Right.
People want to give that, like you said with the refugees.
Yeah.
I have this stuff. They need it. Let's make that happen. But when we can convert something that you don't want anymore to food, shelter, education, dignity, self-worth, that is magic. Like, that is a transformation that I wouldn't have believed. If I hadn't come to Souls for Souls, I'd have been like, I don't know. I don't buy it. But I see it. I see it all the time. Once we got clear about the transformational power of a business model that helped people in a business way get out of poverty, and it was honest and it was clear and equal, that changes the game. When you live in a place like Haiti, the people we work with, there's nothing equal in their lives. They are at the bottom. Their great-great-great-great-grandmother was at the bottom.
Yeah.
They are not. They don't have to be there anymore. You know, there are other solutions, but ours gives them a way quickly, in many cases, to change that dynamic for generations.
Yeah.
That's really powerful.
Yeah.
And so we don't want to lose that.
Yeah. And we'll talk a little more. I want to talk about a particular place here in a little bit where we can kind of walk through that model, just how it works from young children all the way to teens and adults getting jobs, bettering their lives. It is a remarkable sort of process to follow through. One of the things you said is that, speaking about poverty, and I can hear the passion in it when you're talking about Haiti, you said poverty is among humankind's most pervasive challenges. The real obstacle isn't poverty itself, but something more intractable, misguided beliefs. Tell me about the misguided beliefs we have about poverty that stands in the way of...
So I'm going to tell a story. It's not a Souls for Souls story. It's a shoe story that I just learned this week.
Okay.
So this woman, she's maybe in her late 20s now, early 30s, from Uganda. When she was 11, she was in school and her classmates wanted her to be the prefect, sort of the head of the class president or something. I don't know what the equivalent would be, but it's a leadership role. And the teacher said, you can't be a leader, you don't have shoes. We can't have our school represented by somebody who doesn't have shoes. We were talking earlier about, you don't ever know how you crush somebody with a casual word.
Right.
So as an 11-year-old girl, she was flattened by that, almost gave up. She was 13 before she got her first pair of shoes, which were hand-me-downs from her brother, because he had the preference for education. He got the first dibs from the family. She went on to, she just blossomed when she got to high school. Was a leader. She went to school in the UK. She got her degree there. She came back to Uganda, started this thing called Uganda Girls Up Initiative. Last week, she appeared on the Today Show with Michelle Obama. How many girls like her get crushed all the time because these beliefs? Girls don't deserve an education. We only can afford to educate one, so we'll do the... There are all these crazy beliefs about I can't do it, you can't do it, that stand in the way of millions of people. And sometimes it's really casual. Sometimes it's much more systemic and institutionalized. But it doesn't have to be that way all the time for everybody. And one of the things I like about what we do, selling shoes ain't rocket science.
Right.
We work with a lot of people who don't know how to read and write, and yet pretty quickly they own a land, they build a house, they're taking care of their family. It was unimaginable. They just needed somebody to say, I believe you can do this. I can provide you some tools that maybe you don't have on your own, but you know how to work. There are all these things that they already have. They just need somebody to say, I think you can do this. And you get out of the way, and then these amazing things happen that change, like I said, for generations, they change families. That is the mindset that matters as much as anything. It also matters here, Keith. We have, not all of us, we think those poor people, there are things that we put on them about how we help, which aren't true.
Right.
Right? And so the honesty to examine our motivations where we're helping, where we're hurting. I mean, this happens to me all the time. I just got my butt kicked this week about part of our program where I'm thinking, we're doing great work. This woman's just whoosh, 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 guts me about, no, you're not, and here's why. Now, I don't know that she's right, but man, I had a lot of assumptions, misguided beliefs that if I don't take the time, we could make Souls for Souls go down a path that's not helping the people we say we're going to be a part of helping. Yeah. So it's both sides. There's lots of misguided beliefs here about why people are poor, and there are also misguided beliefs in the developing world about why I'm poor. And when you put those together, it just feels impossible. But when you get both of them away, incredible things can happen.
Where'd your heart for this come from?
You know,
it's kind of out of sequence with my questions, but I can hear it in you, and it's like that's so clearly.
When I came to Souls for Souls, I didn't know anything about it. They were doing the founder they had left under really tough circumstances. They were doing a nationwide search. I put my name in the hat. That's it. Even during the interview process, I'm like, this place could really do something crazy good by taking this approach. They weren't really taking it much at the time, but the seeds of it were there. I have never, the last 6 years, Monday, this week was 6 years for me.
Awesome. Congrats.
I cannot believe how happy I am, how engaged I am. Like, I can't even imagine doing anything else right now.
Yeah.
So I'm 54. I think I've got 10 or 15 years left. If I spend that at Souls for Souls, that'll thrill me to death.
Yeah, that comes out in your voice. I want to talk a little bit about this book, Shoestring, just to give, and I encourage everybody to get it, because even if this isn't your charity of choice, it's an education. I mean, you did a great job of just outlining how a lot of people live that many of us aren't aware of. The conditions they're living in, and what a huge difference. I mean, that was not lost on me. The symbolism, really, of it's a huge issue, but us, a worn-out pair of shoes that I don't want anymore. The power you see in that, just from that little effort, and changing lives, that gives you hope. Right, especially for us who kind of understand it like you do and have a heart for it. And you see the news, you read things, and it's easy to just say it's impossible to solve. Why try anything? Yeah. So there's a lot of hope in that book. It's broke down by outlining some different places where you're all working. Right. But then the beautiful thing is, and I want to talk about that, the voices from different people who are at the heart of some of these places. So I'm going to move to one particular place here, and I think it's going to outline the model pretty good. So we're going to pull this back up. We're going to, and you're going to have to help me, Transnistria.
Close? Transnistria.
Transnistria. And so one of the things this weekend, I was out running, doing a little trail running, and listening to some buddy Teaster interviews on a couple of different podcasts. One of the interviews seemed to hint that you might have an interest in history. So like you listen to a lot of history podcasts. That came out a little bit in your book too. You could hear the history flavor to it. Tell me about this Transnistria. Transnistria. By the time we get done with this, I'll be able to say Transnistria.
Bingo, you got it.
There we go. Tell me about the history of this little place and how they came to be sort of their own forgotten place.
That is such the right word, Keith. So Moldova was a part of the Soviet Union, and then when that fell apart in the late 80s and these satellite countries were starting to make decisions, Moldova, for the most part, wanted to be a part of the West. They wanted to be a part of the EU. They felt the future was that direction. Most of the countries spoke Romanian, which is a Romance language, so they were sort of culturally they were oriented that way. But this part of Moldova, called Transnistria because of the Dnistria River, was mostly Russian. As the Soviet Union had invested in Moldova, most of the heavy industry and that sort of stuff was in Transnistria. It's right next to Ukraine, so it was easy access. And most of the people spoke Russian, and so they were oriented east. So as things started cracking up, the Moldovan government said, official language is Romanian. You can't speak Russian anymore, you're done. Well, like lots of places, when you start to mess with language, that really sparks this sort of nationalist fervor, and it did, caused a civil war. About 1,000 people died. And the crazy thing was, it's still unresolved. This was in the early 90s, I think 91, 92, this happened. No country in the world recognizes their government. Even Russia doesn't, because I think they had sort of hoped that Russia would recognize them. They haven't. They have their own prime minister, they have their own currency, they have their own passports. That none of that is recognized anywhere in the world. So you have this place that is kind of, it doesn't exist. Like if you look at a map, it doesn't say Transnistria anywhere. If you go there, they have phones and cars and currency. It looks normal, and it is not. You go to their government building, there's a giant statue of Lenin, giant statue of Lenin. You're like, oh, and the flag still has a hammer and sickle on it. So these sort of weird anachronisms that go back to another time. But what it means, the economy, so unemployment's 50% in the city, 70% in the country. It's a really small area. And if you were born after 1992 and you're an orphan, your passport is not accepted. You're trapped because nobody recognizes your passport. So all these crazy dynamics come out of that, of the economy is full of black market stuff. The education system is a disaster. I mean, a woman that we work with, Anna, who's in the book, she said the university system is a joke. And you can get a degree. It is totally worthless anywhere in the world. So you have all these things that, unless you scratch the surface, you're like, it's not so bad here. And then you spend a day there. Even a knucklehead like me is like, oh my God, this place is weird. And so our partner there, one of the bravest guys in the world, said, I think I can make a difference here. So he started some thrift stores. Now he has 25 of them, called Five Pockets, around Transnistria and maybe a few in Ukraine, that, first of all, employ 250 people. So he's creating a lot of jobs in stores, in the back office, in the warehouse. And then he uses the revenue from that business to fund foster care, which he introduced to the country. It didn't exist. It was all these sort of awful state-run orphanages, which, you know, we've all seen pictures of, and that's exactly what they look like. Right. He says, so they help to fund kids who are still in the institutional side. They're trying to make that better, but what they really want to do is create more foster families so these kids can have a real family. Yeah. And then for those who are stuck in the institutional side, he really is trying to give them an employment opportunity, because they have to leave the orphanage usually at 16 or 17, and they're not ready to go. They're not ready emotionally, educationally, financially, anything. Lots of drugs, lots of teen pregnancy. So this cycle just keeps going on, right? Yeah. They have kids that they can't take care of who go into the orphanage. So that whole system of, so we're a great supplier for Mark, right? We send, he's probably one of our biggest partners. He can take clothes and shoes and winter boots and all this kind of stuff that we don't always have like nobody in Haiti wants winter boots. Right. So, and he runs a great business. Without us, he said to us, there's no way we could have grown. And by growing, he gets to help more people in Transnistria. So it's this great cycle. Right. And his heart, I mean, he's an amazing guy who's super tough on the business side and cannot do enough to help these kids. So it's a perfect combination for us.
And Mark, so these thrift stores then, so we kind of understand this model. If I'm donating my shoes to Souls for Souls, these potentially are shoes then that are going into Mark's thrift stores in Transnistria that's employing folks there.
You got it.
And the money from that store then is supporting, if I understood it right, this movement to get the young people out of orphanages into foster care. And it sounds like, I'm going to talk a little bit here about Anna, because her story was amazing to me as well. She seems to be the big advocate for, mainly driven by the reality. She has a strong belief these children are going to be better off surrounded by loving families, which I tend to support.
Right.
So one of these girls who you highlighted in your book, I believe her name is Lena, I want to read something she wrote. She said, "The people with Help the Children are positive." This is Mark's organization. "They gave me a good direction in life and good advice to stay strong in school and continue my education, not to give up. I'm very thankful to the people I met. They made me a part of Help the Children, and I made new friends. All those years, I had people to lean on and to trust, and that helped me a lot. In Transnistria, a lot of kids like me cannot find jobs. A lot of children from the orphanage, because they're orphans and have the stigma of orphans, which we talked about a little bit ago, nobody hires them. But 5 Pockets, these thrift stores you talk about, hired me. I have an associate's degree in bookkeeping, and I'm now in my first year on the way to getting a bachelor's degree in accounting." Again, the first time I read it, I teared up a little bit, but I put myself in your shoes a little bit and just had to wonder, going back 6 years ago, when you're interviewing for this job,
right,
could you have imagined that a young girl in Transnistria,
right,
on the other end of just us in a country of abundance, giving away things that we just can't use anymore? And I don't ever want to take away the heart in it. I think that's a very good thing. We all could do more of. Has this?
That happened. That happened since I came to Souls for Souls. Yeah. And the thing that I think is important is that nobody has the answer to this, right? It takes you deciding to donate, us having some capacity to collect it and process it and send it out, Mark to have the genius of starting these thrift stores. And when you think about that, it is a miracle.
Yeah.
It is a miracle. And yet, there are lots of her.
Right.
That's what gets me up every day, right? It's really easy when knowing that happens. Look, 99% of the time we don't know.
Yeah.
Right? But what we do know is that every place that we work and have a great partner, they tell us those stories. Like, this is what happened to Maria. This is what happened to Vanessa. This is Henry. That's like, it's real. It's not like, oh, here's the story.
Yeah.
We can only tell one. They have hundreds of them.
Yeah.
And so our frustration and opportunity is, you talked about the heart in giving. It is, we have a small warehouse here in Richmond. And I went down this morning to meet Stephanie, who runs it. And they had 20 second grade kids in sorting shoes. They had a woman from Winchester who drives down with a load of shoes once a month. We had a woman from a women's club in Virginia Beach. All these people look into their closet and say, I don't need this. Hey, Keith, I bet you have stuff in your closet. They're reaching out to other people. They're doing shoe drives. And with all that, still 85% of the stuff in the world in America still goes in the trash.
Yeah.
So when I think about what could happen, Lana, Marie-Ange, Vanessa, et cetera, we could be doing 5 times that. Yeah. If we can get it out of the trash. Yeah. That's what breaks my heart every day. Yeah. Is to think about the opportunity that is literally buried in the ground.
Yeah. You said something a minute ago, and this always sort of gets to me. You said this is a miracle. And so I share Anna. We're going to talk about Anna here. I share her Christian faith. Mm-hmm. One way I think that often works against us, Christians specifically, is that we follow this guy who came and worked miracles. And I think some days we just think, well, we can't live up to that miracle, so we'll just wait till he comes work another miracle, and often underestimating the miracles we have within us. And simply by reaching out to the right people, connecting to the right people, breaking down some barriers, and then sharing the miracles that are happening.
So one of the things, we're not a faith-based organization. Yeah. We work with a ton of organizations that are, and a lot who are 180 degrees away from that, right? And we were going through this debate. I'd only been at Souls for Souls for maybe a year. We were rebuilding the board and having this conversation about, because Souls for Souls, for many years, had tried to ride the fence.
Right.
Like they had this sort of old logo with a halo, but then we're not. So I'm like, guys, we need to be clear about who we are, because we're not right now. We're trying to have it both ways, and as we get more public, this is going to be an issue unless we own who we are.
Right.
So one of the guys on the board, who's one of the founding board members, man of deep faith, and sort of a missionary kind of attitude. He's a dentist, so lots of medical missions. His Christian faith drives him.
Yeah.
So we're having this debate. He's a very quiet man, like a lot of dentists. He's a very quiet man. And finally, we said to him, like, hey, Nelson, you got to weigh in on this. You're the only guy here from the beginning. You have to help us answer this question. And I was fully expecting him to say, we got to be faith-based. And he said something, he doesn't even remember saying this, which makes me crazy. He said, the work speaks for itself. And I think that is the key thing, Keith, is you said it. It's, you have to believe certain things, but if you don't act, big damn deal.
Right.
And so when he said it, the work speaks for itself, it'll attract the right kind of people.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether you follow Jesus or you think it's all random.
Yeah.
Taking action is the only way to make a difference. And so that's what keeps me centered is we can take a step right now to make a difference to this. And that miracle for a lot happens.
Right.
And to me, that's an amazing thing to be a part of.
Yeah. No. I'm a souls for souls believer, trust me. In Transnistria, and just drawn together this whole system, which to me, again, is another miracle. Here's this guy, Mark, against all odds. I mean, you said...
Odds we can't even imagine.
Right. You painted that picture. No government recognizes them. They're literally sort of hostages in their own place. Yeah. I'm not sure how hopeless can get when you're looking around, 50% unemployment, and knowing we're not going anywhere.
It's just us.
There are no borders to cross.
Right.
We are each other's keepers. So Mark got these thrift stores. He's hiring these people, and then he's working with this Anna, and Anna's on this crusade. She's an advocate for, and she grew up in a fairly tough situation. She's not an orphan, but tough. Right. And so she's got a heart for these orphans. She's got a heart for getting them in homes. And so she says this. She says, today we have about 10 people on staff. We go into different places, speak about the need. We find families who want to take kids. We teach them about trauma, about the children, how to raise them, and what the differences are because they're orphans. You and I talked a little bit about this. So in my professional life right now, I'm doing a lot of work around the impact of trauma on our young people. And one of the things I'm trying, sort of one of these misguided theories out there that I'm trying to work to debunk, is that a lot of times we look at our young people, our adolescents, and we see their behaviors and we just make some judgments based solely on that. We don't dig into their deeper stories. And science is telling us a lot more, that these young people in Transnistria who are experiencing this trauma are having brains rewired in a way that are, one, leading them to the potential for some real serious health outcomes down the road. A lot more science is saying this is generational, so it's not just I see you acting that way, so I'll act that way. It's that, no, that's your biology. It's about to become my biology, which when I factored this all in a place like Transnistria, that got pretty powerful to me. But I was encouraged by this woman, Anna, who seems to understand that there's a way, because one of the things then, and I've done some work with teachers, is that and teachers are a great example. They have young people coming into their classroom, living in traumatized homes. These are kids that are sitting, even here in the United States, even here in Ashland.
Not far from where we are right now.
Right. They're going home tonight, and part of their night is wondering, will there be dinner? Part of their night will be wondering if dad's coming home and beating me or mom tonight. Just a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
And then sometimes we have a hard time understanding why they come into the classroom, and it's not as simple, sit down, pull out your books, get ready to take notes. And these kids... And so I've had to help folks understand that That's not how their brain has worked. Their brain's wired for years to adapt to volatility, danger, hostility. That's where they live. Their brains are comfortable in that. They got no idea about rational problem solving. Let you and I talk. They have no brain that's ever been wired to work that way. But the thing I talk with some teachers about and other people is the beautiful thing is that we have this brain that can be rewired. But it takes somebody teaching us. It takes some skills. It takes somebody passionate enough to go around and work with these families and help them understand this is a different kid, but you can do this. Right. You can work with them and help them. And I want to ask you about this because I'm sure, this has worked on you as well. Anna, she's one of these folks who can leave.
Absolutely.
She's one of the folks that had a passport where she could go. She's obviously a very bright woman.
4 or 5 languages. She could do anything.
And in this country,
for sure,
could make a lot of money.
Could make a lot of money.
Why does she stay?
Part of me is like, I could ask her that 100 times and I would never understand what makes her stay. I know what she says and I believe her. I think there's a patriotic element of, these are my people and I can help them, so I should. So I think there's one that's sort of like we could understand. There's another level of, and you alluded to this, she sees her, like she missed this by a hair's breadth of this being her life. And she knows, because now she's bringing these kids into her home and her mother's having a second chance to kind of do it right. I don't think she could give that up. Money would never replace that for her. I'm sure there are times when she says, boy, it'd be great to have more money, right?
Yeah.
There's no question about that. It could never replace the satisfaction that is so obvious for her of helping some kid have a different path than if they stay in that orphanage and, don't have this loving family. She knows what's going to happen. And she could not live with herself, for sure.
She made mention that one of the girls at the orphanage made the comment that the best thing that had ever happened in her life was Anna showed up there. And it was that sort of sparked this. She pretty soon had 3 of these girls in her home.
Right.
And then, like you said, her mom, who had kind of wondered about all this, her mom gets involved. And so, again, this miracle of watching from a distance, this family healing going on as they help other children experience family healing. And then, you just back all this up to Mark, his organization, these thrift stores funded by Souls for Souls. How much of that has to do, because you just said it a minute ago, and then I read it, you'd done a lot of different things before you got to Souls for Souls.
Yep. Been
pretty successful. Most of those things you did, if not all of them. And you just said it here, and you said it in your book. I'm as happy as I've ever been. How much of that happiness is rooted in stories like Anna? How much of that?
It's a huge part to know that we help play a part in so many people having a really different outcome than they could have imagined. Like that's a powerful thing. But also, I love the fact that this model requires a lot of discipline around how to run a business. So I get a lot of juice from that. Our team totally gives me energy around being around them. When I put those 3 things together, the fact that I really get to see the difference that we are able to help make in other people's lives, that we have a way of doing it that uses all parts of my brain.
Yeah.
So that gives me a lot of personal satisfaction. And I get to do with people I really love and respect, who work way harder than I do, believe in it more than I do. It is incredible to be pulled along by that, and for me not to have that diminish one whit in the last. And you alluded to it earlier. When I came, it was a train wreck.
Yeah.
So there were lots of reasons to quit.
Yeah.
And
it sounds like a lot of that you discovered on the. It's kind of like you took the job and then you got a lot of by the ways as you started digging into it.
I knew a lot of it. The board, I don't think, tried to shade anything or pull. They didn't know,
right?
But as we pulled the layers off,
it was more discovery.
There was lots more to go. So people did leave, and the ones who left voluntarily, I don't blame them. The ones who didn't leave voluntarily, that happens. They came under different circumstances. But the people who stayed, like, they are fired in a different way, right? I mean, they've been through the kiln.
Right.
And the people who come now, they absorb that. And so even if you just walked in, we just hired a new chief marketing officer a few weeks ago, I can already tell he's like, damn, this is different than what I thought. That provides a lot, because that's who I work with every day, right? That's my community.
Yeah.
And then I get to go out and see this work, and I'm like, just filled up more. So it's hard to believe. I find it hard to believe that I still feel that way 6 years later.
Yeah. No, it's a blessing.
It really is.
To get into something like that. I'm curious, going back to your running a little bit, you're a guy driven by the next challenge, the next big distance, and sounds like you want to stay fired up about this. Where does Souls for Souls go? I mean, how do you build on what is there? How do we keep wearing out poverty?
Yeah, it is. So earlier this year, the guy who was our COO, David Graven, he's in the book. I really respect this guy a lot. I gave up the president title, so now he's the president and COO, and I'm the CEO. He's an amazing operations guy. And so everybody in the organization reports to him now, and I have one direct report, that's David. So my job is going to be to think more about that. Where do we go, and work with our board? And there's one easy answer, is that 85% that's still going in the trash, right? Figuring out how to capture more of that so that we can help more people, that's the most important thing that we do. Some of that is about, raising money to fund that. This, in the last 18 months or so, we've opened 7 small warehouses. I mentioned one in Richmond. We have 6 other ones. Well, we're doing that out of operations now. Because we're not for profit, we can't raise equity. No bank is going to loan us money to do something like open a warehouse and hire a person. That's a terrible story to tell your banker.
Right.
So figuring out how to fund that in a creative way, that's going to be a big focus of mine. We have 7. Do we need 50? I don't know. But we need to make it more and more easier for people to donate, because when we do that, this woman drove from Winchester. She probably passed 500 Goodwill drop-offs. Why did she do that?
Right.
Right? Because I got to talk to her this morning. She said, I know what you're going to do with these shoes.
Yeah.
I got to find a lot more ways to make it easier for people like her to say, I'll do that.
Yeah.
So earlier this year, we started a partnership with DSW. They have 500 stores around the U.S. You can drop off your shoes in any DSW. That is dramatically better than anything we've ever had. You can go to Zappos and print out a mailing label, and they'll pay for the shipping for you to mail us. So we're finding these ways to make it easier, but we find that when we get into community, that changes the game. You have a person who can sit down across from you, or a teacher, or a community leader. So I think that's going to be a big part of it. We can't do more on the impact side until we figure out how to collect more. On the other side of things, Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa, is where extreme poverty is getting worse. So a lot of the world, it's getting better. It's dropped dramatically, mainly because India and China have performed so well over the last 20 years. But in sub-Saharan Africa, that's not the case. So we're going to, I think, focus more there. But we have to have more shoes and clothes to be able to fund them. The worst thing that we can do is send them something one time. Yeah. They oh, this is great, and then we never show up again, right?
Right.
Like you were saying, you don't show up.
Right.
One more Western guy comes over here and sends some crap story, tells me how great it's going to be, and I never see him again. So we're being really cautious about how we do that. But if we went from this year collecting 4 million pairs of shoes to next year collecting 14 million pairs of shoes, gone like that. The demand is unmeetable.
Right.
That's what's next for us. We got to figure that out.
Yeah. No, and I think Well, the book, great idea. Like I said, if somebody will, and I'll be encouraging everybody I can to read the book, because when you read it, wearing out poverty, or let's fight poverty, or let's eradicate poverty, those become catchphrases to me, because it just seems like a daunting task.
Right.
Until you start reading about miracles. Like I said, when I can sit and see a pair of shoes change this young girl's life.
Right.
Change an entire system. When you start talking about removing 75 young people from an orphanage and getting them into foster care.
Yeah.
Getting them from this system of just keep you fed and alive orphanage to loving families. You and I were a part of those. So we know the value in that, how they can change a life. I don't think I'll ever look at another pair of my shoes the same, because you do look at each one of them as a potential miracle. Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of this. I hope it will get a lot more people to drive from Winchester or wherever and to do their own drives. Another part of your organization I want to touch on a little bit, because it fascinates me, is, and it seems to be different from a lot of the other organizations, you guys offer a lot of opportunities for people to travel to these different places to see the miracles.
We do, and it's really powerful. So most of the travel that we do is focused on giving away shoes, because you can't take a bunch of knuckleheads and show up in somebody's business and say, we're here to help. Can't speak the language, don't know how to negotiate. I mean, there are lots of reasons that we're not able to be helpful there. So we try to expose them to the entrepreneurs without getting in the entrepreneur's way.
Yeah.
But, one of the things, again, whether you're a person of faith or not, when you kneel down and wash somebody's feet and put a pair of shoes on them, you're pretty hard-hearted if that doesn't move you.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're a Christian, there's a whole lot of symbolism that comes with that.
Right.
If you're the person who believes we're all sort of random molecules, it's still a big damn deal to be there in that moment and hold somebody's foot in your hand. I think the thing that we're getting more comfortable saying, and I really believe this, we have to be honest about these trips are more for us than them. And that's okay, right? Kids are going to get shoes, they're going to grow in 6 months, they're going to need new shoes, and hopefully we might not be back in 6 months, but we're back in a year or 18 months. But to see people connect that way and come home and like, all right, I get it. I can do this with my shoes for the rest of my life. I can get other people. Okay. Then they have been transformed in a way that also will now ripple back and have that impact.
Absolutely.
And so whether that's, you do that 1 week, we have people who travel with us 10 times. They come back to the same country because they love what they're doing, or anything in between. And we have 10-year-olds and we have 70-year-olds who get to have that experience, and they come back changed people.
Yeah. My wife went to Haiti, not last summer, 2 summers ago on a mission trip. And I stayed behind and looked out for our 2 little heathens. But it was funny, is that the day before she was coming back, and they were being typical boys, not enough food in the house or this and that. So let me tell y'all, just a little forewarning, all right? You can have that argument with me today. I wouldn't have it with Mom when she gets home tomorrow, because she's going to have spent a week with people where your arguments are luxury arguments for them. And it is, to bring that perspective back to a home and to a family changes a lot.
It is, it's one of the things we're getting better at talking about. There's a lot of guilt coming back. Right, about how much we have, and if it stops there, then we've kind of failed. Like, the idea is not to make people feel bad. First world problems are still problems, and we should not be too glib about that. I mean, your iPhone is in charge all day. Maybe it's not the most important thing, but if that experience allows you to act differently, back to the taking action and not just thinking, because guilt stops right here, right? It stops in your head. If you can transform that into, all right, I don't have to worry about how much food I have, but I can get rid of 10 pairs of shoes and you're not going to notice it in my closet. Right? Or anyway, you can be more mindful about all these things that you're going to do anyway, That's a big deal. If enough people have that experience, the whole system changes. So that's what can happen. I'm sure that's a little bit what happened with your wife. She comes back and she doesn't look at it the same way anymore.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you one sort of wrapping up, going back to the beginning, and let me also add, I'll share all the links to Souls for Souls.
Thank you so much.
Let folks know where they can get your book. And I'll also add, and I'm not really a marketing guy, but one thing that drives me crazy is bad websites. Your guys is awesome. Just simple, very easy to follow, just the layout of it.
Well,
and so compliments to that. I don't know why I'm such a website critique. Well, I do know. It's because if I'm looking for something, I don't like to go to a mess and just see things. And I'm not the most organized guy in the world, but I like my websites organized. So Souls for Souls, whoever's doing that, hats off to them. You just got done recovering from the 100-mile Grindstone. And did I read that take you 35 hours?
35 hours.
And I didn't mean to say that
minutes.
took you 35 hours. What I meant to say is you were out there running for 35 hours.
Yeah, so now we'll move into the runner gear. So I had knee surgery in January. And he found some stuff when he got in that was worse than he anticipated. So I thought I would be running again by this summer. And I ran in 2013, and I got back in for 2018, the Hard Rock 100, which is my peak running experience. And I couldn't do it. I wasn't able to train. So I went and I volunteered, kind of got in a tailspin in June, where I was just depressed, right? I wasn't running. I couldn't do Hard Rock. I went and I volunteered. Service always makes you feel better, right?
Yeah.
So I got to do that. And to get back in the lottery for Hard Rock, you have to run a qualifying race at least every 2 years. And my qualifier was up. So if I didn't run a qualifying race by the end of November, I would miss Hard Rock for 2019. I'd miss having a shot at Hard Rock. Totally untrained. I mean, I ran 34 miles in December. I hiked 20 in May. And I did 38 miles in the beginning of September. That's it.
You're kidding.
That's it. I rode my bike. So I thought this is going to be maybe the hardest thing I've done because I'm just not physically trained. So I had 38 hours. That's the cutoff time. And I figured if I could hike 80 and shuffle 20, I'd have a shot. That was my strategy. And it was a beating. It was so hard. But I got through it, right? I mean, mentally, that was the reason, was like, I need this qualifier. My doctor said, you probably won't run for a month afterwards. I said, I'm fine with that. And I had lots of friends. One of my best friends lives near. He crewed me. I had another friend come down from DC and pace me the last 35. You're never out there by yourself on these things. Even when you're by yourself, you're not by yourself, right? And so I had two friends who gave up a lot of time, spent 2 crappy nights out in the cold, wet, miserable. And without them, I wouldn't have done it.
That's amazing.
And I think it's just about the hardest thing I've ever done physically. I did Hard Rock in 2013. It took me longer. I felt 1,000 times better than I did at this. Hard Rock I did in 45 something. So I was 10 hours less. I was destroyed after this thing. And I deserved that.
Right.
Given how much training I'd had.
Right. I mean, you said basically 3 runs, a couple long ones in there in 6 months, I guess it sounds like.
A year. So I'm glad I did it. It was a real beating. The grinds. There's a reason it's a Hard Rock qualifier. It's a hard race. You have 23,000 feet of gain and 23,000 feet of loss. And the race starts at 6 o'clock at night. So I was out for 35 hours. Only 12 was in the daylight.
It's amazing.
So in that first night, it was rainy and foggy. So you couldn't see anything. Your world got really small. And just like one step at a time. That's what it takes.
And literally your mental strength was this Hard Rock qualifier.
I want to get back into the lottery. So I may do all that and not get to run it next year.
And where's the Hard Rock?
It's in southwestern Colorado. It's a big loop. Starts in a little town called Silverton, and then either goes toward Ouray, Telluride, and back, or it switches directions each year. And it's 100 miles, 33,000 feet of gain, 48 hours to finish. And it is the most beautiful place in the world.
Wow. I think when I went searching for you as part of stalking you after I seen this, I went and found you on Facebook, and the first post I think I stumbled upon was you had put something on there about being a part of the Barkley Fall Classic next year. And I thought, why? That's when I knew this guy.
I used to put in for the big Barkley. I would never do that. I'm in no way qualified to tackle that. I just don't. So the Barkley Fall Classic is a 50K loop where you get some of the big Barkley experience.
Yeah.
That is all I need. I've done the Barkley Fall Classic twice, and I did the marathon once. Hopefully I'll get through something again next September, but it is really hard. It is really hard.
One of the friends who ran with me at the Georgia Jewel, she had put in for the Barkley Fall Classic just off prompting of some friends, and they let her in. But then she reached out to me and said, kind of need to know if you're going to go try to get redemption at the Georgia Jewel next year, because it's the same weekend.
Oh, okay.
And I said, oh yeah, it's not. I'm going back. You go do what you need to. I'm going back. It doesn't sit
I
well
did a
with me.
100-miler called the Cruel Jewel, which is on a big part of that Georgia Jewel cake. It is a really tough course. Yeah. It is hard. You picked a tough one for your first one.
Yeah, well, and you're here in Ashland. There is no way to train for that. Went to Charlottesville a couple of times and tackled some mountains over there, but there's no terrain. Poor Farm Park, which I told you about. It's trails. It's nothing like the rock and then the uphill. And then, like I said, for me, it was a worse scenario. I mean, I've walked out the door a few years ago here at the Patrick Henry, walked out the door at 7 o'clock in the morning. Heat index was almost triple, and I knew this ain't happening.
This ain't the day.
It's just not happening. So, buddy, I appreciate your time. You are an interesting guy. Glad to know you've got roots here at Randolph-Macon. I am a Souls for Souls convert in a very big way, so I appreciate all you're doing, not just for your organization, but you're one of these guys now. I know when you say wearing out poverty, you get what that is, you get what needs to happen, and you have a way about you that I think can bring other people some of those stigmas, some of those barriers that we talk about. I think you're one of those guys that can help us break that down. So hopefully you're going to take us a long way.
Well, it's been a pleasure. It's a real honor to find somebody who gets to know Souls for Souls and us in this way, and to then sit down and talk with you has been a real pleasure. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Well, a few weeks has passed since I recorded this conversation with Buddy Teaster, and I tell you, my mind has not stopped spinning and revolving around Souls for Souls in this conversation that I just had and you just listened to with Buddy. I hope that it made some sort of an impact on you like it did me. I've had the chance to go down to their Richmond warehouse that we talked about here and meet Stephanie myself, and really get to see that this Souls for Souls thing, the people that they are bringing together are just dynamite people. She was awesome, more than willing to show me around and let me see the work that she's doing here locally through Souls for Souls, for Souls for Souls, with Souls for Souls. And it just drew me more and more into this organization and what they're doing to, like Buddy talked about, wear out poverty. I'm fascinated by the model that they have, that indeed it takes this idea of giving shoes to something far more than relief, which I think maybe we get confused some days, rightfully so. I guess I plead ignorant very much to what it takes to wear out poverty, and sometimes I think that we can think just by simply giving, by simply providing relief, that we are doing something that is long-term good. And not that short-term good doesn't have a value, but I think ultimately we would all hope
to one day put an end to this kind of mass suffering that poverty brings to so many people, and somehow feel that maybe what folks need is something beyond relief, to give them hope, to give them what they need to kind of take over their own lives and situations, to make them better in a way that we wake up every day believing we can make our own lives better. And I think that's what Souls for Souls, I think that's the huge impact this conversation had on me. That looking around at both the resources that I have here and the number of running shoes that just lay around my house that were worn only for a few months and are still perfectly good, the miracle that they can work in lives. So just the human resources that end up being waste that can be good. I look at my time resources, the things that I do, and how so much of that can be pointed in a more helpful way. I think Souls for Souls will ultimately become a huge piece of that journey for me. Like I said, my head hasn't stopped spinning since talking with Buddy. So there'll be a lot changing, I think, in my life here in the near future. I invite you along for the ride. Many of you have been along for those rides before. I get something stirring in my heart, and right or wrong, I just can't sit still with it. And so I've been doing some work and making some plans around being a more vocal and more active supporter of Souls for Souls, using my own running journey to do that. So I invite you to keep listening, keep following along, and join me maybe in where this journey goes. Until then, I thank Buddy Teaster again for really giving me his time when he had so much going on that weekend. So I'm grateful that he sat down and had this conversation. I thank all of you who come in on a weekly or bi-weekly basis and listen to these conversations. And if you've listened to a lot of them, you probably have followed along this sort of journey that I've been on in this podcast. And one thing often leads to another. One conversation often puts me in touch with another conversation, and they often lead to a new initiative. I have a funny feeling that's where this conversation may go in the biggest way ever for me personally. So thank you all who support this and come along and make conversations like I had with Buddy possible. It wouldn't happen without you. So I hope you all have a great week. Get out there and run if you're going to run. I'm doing a lot of resting right now. I've been doing a lot of running lately, so resting is key. If you're not going to run, get out there and cheer somebody on to just do something good in their life. Cheering is helpful. So even if it's not running, just give somebody a big lift, a big voice of encouragement. I think we heard a lot of that in this conversation out of Buddy, just this passion he has for lifting people up. I just think the mere practice of lifting others up brings people more hope than maybe we know. And if running and cheering, neither of those are your thing, and you're still here listening, well, thank you, and come back. I promise we'll keep bringing some good stories like this one we had today with Buddy Teaster and Souls for Souls. So you can go to my website, and wherever I share this, I'm going to share some links to Souls for Souls. Definitely share some links to Buddy's book, Shoestrings, and I encourage you to check both of those out. Until next time, I'll talk to you later.